What is up, everyone? I am TST's the Mudman, and it's time to figure out what we are going to do this weekend in Gods Unchained. So, before we talk about the meta, we've got to talk about this fresh new balance patch. Just last night, we were hit with a huge balance patch, and get comfy, because I am going to go over the entire thing, every last detail. Let's jump right into it. The first change, and arguably the most important change, was to Dralamar. It has been nerfed. It is now 7 mana instead of 6. It still does the exact same thing it used to, and now its card text reflects that. And that concludes the balance patch. So, thanks to everybody for sticking with me through all of those details. Let's jump into the meta. And I guess before we do that, Dralamir was nerfed, and it was the centerpiece of the best deck in the meta. However, that deck made up less than 1% of the meta at Mythic rank, so everything's pretty much exactly the same as it was last week. As you can see, we've got War, Light, and Nature, all at the top slots in popularity. War is the most popular, but they're all right around like 22-ish% of the meta. Then we've got Magic, Deception, and Death, all around 11% of the meta, pulling up the rear. When you run into War over the weekend, it's probably going to be some sort of aggressive Slayer War, probably Viking-themed with relics and lots of face damage. Light is always creature-centric zoo decks, and maybe they go up to 7 mana and play Zealous March, and maybe they don't. But all they care about is building boards and capitalizing on those board states. Nature is, that normal old mid-range nature leaning towards aggression. Just as good as it's been for the last bunch of weeks. For Magic, Dralamir may have been nerfed, but the Miracle Aetherbugs archetype still lives on. There's a brand new Magic combo deck floating around. You're probably not going to see a ton of Magic over the weekend, but when you do, it'll likely be that new combo deck and or like some sort of tempo Magic deck. Then for Deception, Deception's usually aggressive. However, Control Deception has made a resurgence in this past week. So you'll probably see aggressive Deception, but there is a chance you'll get some Sleep Deception floating around. And Death is always Zombie Death. Zombie Death has been relatively competitive compared to how it was for the past couple of weeks. So you probably won't see too many Death opponents, but those zombies can be pretty strong. But yeah, now that we have talked about the meta, let's jump into some specific deck lists. Okay, so let's start off with War, the most popular god. This aggro war list was made by Clutch, and I'm a big fan of this Slayer war list. It doesn't go deep into the Viking synergies or the Relic synergies. It's more of just like a true blue zoo deck. But the creature composition in this build is really strong for this meta. Let's see, we've got 2 Master Tacticians, we've got the Adi as well as the Raid Reveler, the Bloodguard, and the Viking Bloodguard. All of these creatures are really hard to remove. Also we have great creatures like Viking War Maiden. This card's just great. But the cards I just brought up, these protected ones and this Afterlife one, all those cards take like either 2 spells or a creature and a spell or 2 creatures to remove. So in this current meta, which is so board centric, the majority of the creatures the Clutch has put into this deck are just really difficult to remove with just one resource. Like Pyramid Warden has a ton of stats. This usually takes 2 things to get rid of. And then you have things like Axewoman as well as Tavern Brawler, as like defensive tools. And of course you have your big strong relics. You got your Blade of Sticks. You also have your 2 Scythes of the Harvest. And of course you have the single copy of I Need a Weapon. And I'm a big fan of the I Need a Weapon plus Scythe of the Harvest thing. I Need a Weapon hasn't been in existence for that long, but most players who play I Need a Weapon don't run any Scythes. They only run Blades of Sticks. With the idea of you can play I Need a Weapon and Blade of Sticks for 5 mana, like all on one turn. Whereas Scythe and the Harvest and I Need a Weapon cost 6, and aggro decks, don't always get to 6 mana. However, if you play I Need a Weapon and you get the Scythe and the Harvest, that's 15 damage of just scything. Like that's so much damage. It goes face super hard. It kills Porphyrions. Porphyrions are hard to deal with. So big strong Scythe seems good. And then we have all these hard to remove creatures that can either go face or take great value trades. And since so many of these cards are hard to remove, you're probably going to be able to stick your veteran on one of them to get like a nice buff as well as a body and just capitalize on your board state even harder. So in this meta with all the aggro nature, aggro war, and aggro light floating around, having all of these protected things seems really strong. you know, as well as the Blood Guard. This, you know, just makes creatures when it dies. It's so hard to fully clear like a board, you know, with these creatures, which I am a big fan of in this current meta. Uh, Also, this deck is super strong and super fast, so if you want to finish your weekend rank quickly, then this is a great deck for you. But all in all, Slayer War has been performing really well, and I think if you go with a list like this one, you will you know, perform well as well. And now let's move on to the most powerful god in Light. This list was made by Himic, and this deck just has all of the best Light cards. We've got all the strong early game buff candidates in your Pacifist, your Netherborn Binders, of course your Vexing Vicars, as well as your Devoted Followers. Then you have your Shield Bearers, your fellow Janissaries, as well as your Militant Theists, all creatures that can buff those aforementioned powerful creatures. And then as you're making one or two very tall creatures and a couple of small creatures, you buff all of those up with your Prayer of the Desperate and do devastating damage to your opponent. And if you somehow have not won yet, all you gotta do is wait until 7 mana, and then you drop your Zealous March, and that will definitely get you over the finish line. This deck has lots of other amazing utility cards that Light has access to. Of course, we've got the Mace of Calling, you know, new super strong Core Set Refresh Relic, 2 mana, 2/3, and you get a 1 mana 2/2 Acolyte for your hand, so it's good for destroying about 3 creatures, and you get a cheap creature for Light to, you know, capitalize with. We've got Wrong Path, which is another incredibly powerful Light card from the Core Set Refresh. Pull an enemy creature from the board to the top of their deck, and then you draw a card. So you neutralize your opponent's creature for 1 turn. You don't let them draw for their next turn. It's just amazing. Let's see, in the neutral slots, we've got Porphyrion, because it's just the best 5-mana creature, and this is a creature-oriented mid-range deck, so of course you throw in the Porphyrion. Minosian Infiltrator is great in the mirror matches. This list doesn't have Pyramid Warden, but most Light decks do. Minosian Infiltrator is great at dealing with Pyramid Wardens. It's great at dealing with like Cursed Obelisks and stuff like that. Then of course we have Vanguard Axewoman to, you know, be defensive. It's also fantastic to combo with Shield Bearer, fellow Janissary, even Militant Theist for a big value trade. And yeah, all in all, this deck is just really great at building a board, capitalizing on that board, having a huge, massive buff, and then overwhelming their opponents. But that is not it for the Light. We also have this Light list made by the Sambam, and this is sort of like an anti-Light Zoo Light list. As we've been saying this whole video, the meta is very board-centric at the moment, so he has slotted in 2 Ogre Archers to help control the board state. He also has 2 copies of Feral Shapeshifter, as well as 2 copies of Iron-Tooth Goblin in order to destroy those Maces of Calling. But the main thing I like about this deck is the Feral Shapeshifter. This is a card that was buffed in the Core Set Refresh. It's now a 4 mana 4/4 instead of a 5 mana 3/4. It's still hidden for a turn. It still deals 1 damage. Dealing 1 damage to a creature is, you know, decent. Killing something is great. Maybe you pop a ward. But the main reason why Feral Shapeshifter is nice in Light is because you can play it on turn 4. It's very hard to remove because of the hidden, and then you capitalize on it with Canonize the turn after, giving you a 7/7 with Protected that you can either deal a bunch of damage with or have a great value trade with. And having like a prime canonized target like this could be game-winning in the mirror match, you know, getting a big tempo swing. Then, you know, besides that, the Sambam does have an extra cudgel in here for even more board control, you know, for those mirror matches. The only thing that I find questionable is the Asterius. I feel like Prayer of the Desperate is just better. You know, we've got a lot of things that have more than 3 attack in this deck. The Highborn Knights, the Ogre Archers, and the Feral Shapeshifter, all the cards that are coming down right before Asterius all have more than 2 attack. And then, you know, of course, Asterius is 6 mana over 5 mana, so I would recommend throwing in a Prayer of the Desperate. That being said, Asterius is also a creature, which is a big benefit. But the main takeaway from this is if you want to help tech against Light, Feral Shapeshifters, some relic removals, specifically Iron-Tooth Goblins, so you can destroy the entire mace. And, you know, Minosian Infiltrators, all great in those mirror matches. But ultimately, a Light list like this is probably going to perform better. It just has so many incredibly strong cards. And if you have the collection to make a Light list anything like this, you will definitely perform exceedingly well of this weekend ranked event. Nature is the next god I want to go over. This aggressive mid-range list was made by Mighty Uncle. And this is a very interesting nature list, and I think it looks really strong for this current meta. We, of course, have some of the nature staples. We've got the Marshwalker as well as the Beetle, two incredibly strong one-mana creatures with regen. Then we've got the Chiron to buff them up as well as destroy some Necroceptors. We've got the low-hanging fruit for some board control, some ward and protected popping, and of course the vibrant fruits that it creates. As you can see, we only have one copy of Canopy Barrage, which I think is a real heads-up play in this current meta. There's a lot of protected and a lot of ward floating around, so Canopy Barrage has not felt particularly consistent. We've got two copies of Flame Blades, which are really good for destroying Vexing Vicars, as well as just, general board control in general. Underbrush Boar, super obvious, amazing 2-mana tempo tool. Celestial Stag, because they're good. Lightning Strike, just a single copy. Once again, there's lots of ward floating around, but Lightning Strike is now targeted, and it's really good for destroying big creatures. Then we've got the Managar as well as the Rabid Bear, some 3-mana 3/4s. There are a lot of 3/3s floating around, and like I've been saying this whole video, the meta is very board-centric, so these guys are good for taking value trades. We've got Wildfire in here, and every single creature in the deck, barring Porphyrion and Chiron, are wild, so they're all affected by Wildfire's big AoE buff. Dealing 1 damage to your opponent's side of the board is good, but giving all of your stuff regen and +1/+1 is great for board control. And then we have 2 copies of Falling Star, which was nerfed about a month ago, but it's really great in this current meta, because it's one of the few answers to Porphyrion, and Porphyrion is running rampant all over the ladder. This card is super strong, and it's really hard to remove on curve, and Falling Star is one of the best ways to deal with it. Then we've got 2 copies of Jagstaff, because they are high in tempo. This is a very board-centric meta. This makes a creature and kills a creature. It's super good. And now we have a very interesting card in the Frost Giant Deadshot. This was also buffed and moved to the Nature Domain in the Core Set Refresh. It's a 6-mana 6/6 that deals 3 damage to the strongest enemy creature. So it's just a strong tempo swing turn. It's plays a similar role to something like a Giant Pangolin. However, it's not confused, and it's a 6/6, so it has slightly more health. It, of course, doesn't have Blitz, but it does deal 3 damage. It's just, it's also wild, apparently, even though it looks like a person. It seems like a really strong card. I'm a big fan of it in this current deck list. And then we have Sudden Bloom to buff up one of your many creatures, as well as clear your opponent's board. And the Sudden Bloom pairs extremely nicely with the Feral Shapeshifter. Just like in that light deck we just talked about, Feral Shapeshifter is also strong in nature. It is a wild creature, which is very relevant for this, wild synergy deck. And it's something that you can play and stick onto the board, so you can guarantee a big Sudden Bloom, which sounds quite strong. Essentially speaking, this is a very board-centric nature deck. It seems really strong and makes use of some cool new Core Set Refresh cards like that Frost Giant, as well as the Feral Shapeshifter. Mighty Uncle himself has played 42 games with a 76% win rate, so the deck is very successful. And if you like nature, I think a list like this will do quite well this weekend. And next up, we've got Miracle Magic. This list was made by Frozen. Dralamir may have been nerfed out of existence, but the Aether Snap Miracle Magic archetype is not gone. We've simply replaced Dralamir with Archmea. For anyone who is uninitiated, Archmea is a 5-mana 3/5 with Ward. After you cast a spell that costs 3 or less, you refresh 1 mana. So it's not as egregious as Dralamir, and you can't go truly infinite with Magic Inks like you could. However, you can play all of your 1-mana spells, which you have lots of for free. You can also generate bonus mana with any 0-mana spell, which of course your helpful Aether Fox will do with your Aether Snap. You can also make 0-mana spells with your Assistant Alchemist, and if you get lucky, with a Dimension Door. So you can still have very powerful miracle turns. You play a bunch of bugs, you do a whole bunch of damage. You might not be able to win in one turn like you used to, but you should be able to clear your opponent's board, deal a whole bunch of damage, and then have a board full of warded insects as well as the Archmea. We also have 2 copies of Stormstress in this deck, which I'm not 100% certain on what it's doing here. It's like a fairly good 5-mana frontline creature. I imagine the idea behind it is, it's got frontline, so it keeps you from dying. It's got a little AoE effect, which will soften up your opponent's board and maybe clear away a couple of their creatures. Definitely clear some zombies if you're playing against zombies. And then I imagine the idea is you play this on turn 5, And then you play your Archmea, and you have your Aether Snap Miracle turn all tucked behind this nice front line. But essentially, this looks like it plays very similarly to the original Dralamir variant. However, it seems like it's a little bit more fair. It is important to note that Archmea costs 5, so if you're lucky, you can pull off the combo a little bit earlier. However, it shouldn't be OTKing as often, but Frozen has shown us that this deck still has a very high win rate. He's played 49 games with an 81.6% win rate as of the filming of this video. And 89 people, in the world has played this deck with a 76% win rate, so the deck seems like it wins very consistently, and it seems like a more fun, more fair version of the old Infinite Dralamir Miracle Combo deck. If you've got the collection for this deck, if you're looking for some fun Aetherbug Miracle action, this could be a great choice for you over this weekend ranked event. And next up, we've got Deception. For the past few weeks, our Deception decks have been very aggressive decks, but like I said in the beginning of this video, Control Deception has had a bit of a resurgence this past week. This Control Deception deck was made by Obelix, and it utilizes some of the new core set refresh like sleep cards, and it seems like a great control deck for this meta. As you can see, he's got a lot of emphasis on the early curve, because the best way to deal with these aggressive like light and war and nature decks is by just beating them on the board. And with cards like Armor Lurker, that's great for taking trades. You got Pyramid Warden, because it's got a ton of stats in frontline for 2 mana. Patient Pickpocket can steal some of your opponent's good cards. Stone Skin Poison is great for controlling the early board state. Same can be said for Hunting Trap. Mugging is really good for destroying Vexing Vicars, as well as Shadow Scryers. Got some Sleep Darts, which, burn and sleep things. It's great. Got a copy of Counterfeit in here, because there's lots of relics floating around the meta right now, and stealing a relic is better than just destroying a relic, so it's very strong. And in a pinch, you can always use it to draw a card. Lady Marcella is fairly obvious. She is a decently static creature that makes some deadly guys, good for controlling the board, and this is a controlled deck. Ludi's Dedekin is a Deception staple. We've got Screams in the Night in here, just 1 copy. This is a new core set refresh card. 3 mana, draw 2 creatures from your deck. If one of them is a Nether, draw another Nether. 4 out of the 17 creatures in this deck are Nethers, so more often than not when you play Screams in the Night, you'll probably be spending 3 mana to draw 3 cards. And let's go over those Nethers, because they're kind of important. Obviously, we've got the Demogorgons. Demogorgon's been in the game forever. It's super strong, but Demo has a brand new friend in Witherfingers. This is the new core set refresh card for Deception. It is a 7 mana, 8/6 with Hidden. Roar, the 3 strongest enemy creatures gain burn +2 and go to sleep. So it's great for stalling your opponent's board, as well as like slowly destroying things, but it's extra powerful with Demo. So now you can live the dream and play Demo, into Witherfinger, and stop your opponent from playing the game at all and healing for 1,000,000 and building up a pretty strong board in the process. We've also got a copy of Cutthroat Insight. This is great for taking your magic opponent's Archmea or your light opponent's Zealous March, something to that effect. And then we are moving on to the 6 mana AoE slot. This deck list has 1 copy of Elixir of the Snake, which is really great in this current meta. It's one of the few ways to deal with Zealous March. There's also just a lot of ward and a lot of protected floating around, so AoE that nerfs things' health is particularly powerful. And then we have 2 Rapture Dances, because that's the classic Deception AoE removal card. This list here, the pilot has played 40 games roughly, with an 84% win rate, so it's done fairly well. But here is the interesting bit. Our friend Sprink is playing an incredibly similar Deception list. He's played 30 games with an 83.3% win rate, so essentially the same win rate. And the only difference in this deck is he has 2 copies of Elixir of the Snake and just 1 copy of Rapture Dance. So Sprink has emphasized destroying Zealous Marches, over just destroying like nature and war boards. But the fact of the matter is, both of these players have played very similar decks, and they both have had very successful win rates. So they have proven that this like sleep-oriented, controlled, mid-rangey Deception deck definitely has legs in the current meta. It looks like it's a lot of fun. If you're a fan of some slower, controlling Deception lists, then one of these could definitely be a great deck for you. Okay, and the last archetype to go over is Zombie Death. This zombie death deck was made by Don't Look, so make sure you share this video a whole bunch so everybody looks. So this is a zombie deck, so of course we've got the classic gimmick. We got your 2 Cursed Obelisks as well as your 2 copies of Necroceptor. You hard mulligan for those. You play them on turn 2 or 3 and you generate zombies every single turn. Your opponent rolls their eyes and you kill them for over many turns with 1,000 paper cuts. And of course you've got the Nether Swarm lore that can buff up your zombies so they're not, dinky. And of course the Overseer of Vitality, which is super good in the meta right now. Not only does it turn your dinky little zombies into big threats, it also destroys an entire wave of Zealous March, as well as is a 6/6. So it's super good in the meta right now. But the really cool part about this zombie death deck that separates it from other zombie death decks is its 2 copies of Monster Size, which is a brand new core set refresh card. It's a 2-mana spell. Set one of your creature's stats to 4/3. So obviously this is always decent with a zombie. Turning a 1/1 leech creature into a 3/4 leech creature is just great. But he also has some different cards to capitalize on that. We've got the Skeletal Hoplite in here, which is naturally a 1/2 with armor 1. And if you can turn this into a 4/3 with armor 1, it's really powerful. And we also have 2 copies of Living Container, which is another amazing candidate as a monster-sized target. Turning this little 1/1 with a big creature inside into a 4/3 is obviously incredibly powerful. Monster Size is also decent with the little impling that Wicked Fae makes. The fact of the matter is this Monster Size should be hitting something pretty good every time you play it, and that's really cool. You have a couple of those big high rolls that we mentioned before, and I'm a big fan of the Monster Size in this list. And then, just besides that, you're doing the zombie gimmick. You want Cursed Obelisk, you want Necroceptor. It's not rocket science. It's a pretty simple deck. But zombies have been fairly competitive these past couple of weeks. Don't Look himself went 23 out of 25, so it can definitely hang. And before we close off the zombie death, gotta mention the Ray of Destruction, arguably the best single target removal in the game right now. 5 mana, destroy a creature, period, end of sentence. Then deal 2 damage to both gods. So it activates Frenzy, it helps kill your opponent, and dealing 2 damage to yourself is like dealing no damage to yourself. You're a zombie deck, you heal 2 damage every turn without even trying. So Ray of Destruction, super strong. Overseer of Vitality, one of the few cards that deals with Zealous March. Monster Size is cool. Zombie Death, I know there's a lot of people who love Zombie Death. It's finally viable, and I'm a big fan of a list like this one. So if you like the zombies as well, good luck, have fun monster sizing. Okay, so we've thought about the meta, we've looked at a whole bunch of different decks, we also digested the entire balance patch. What is the conclusion? What is the best archetype to play this weekend in Gods Unchained? Well, the answer is Light. Light is still the best god in a vacuum. It has great cards. It's almost impossible to deal with its board state. And it's been performing well for the past couple of weeks. It's all the top decks almost on gudex.com. But if you don't want to play Light, perhaps this new Archmea Aether Snap Miracle Magic deck, this could be good. If it's anywhere near as good as the Dralamir variant, it might be the best deck in the meta. But whatever deck you go with, make sure you have fun. Tell us how you did in the TST Discord, and have a wonderful day. Hey, you! Did you know that subscribing to the TST YouTube channel will increase your win rate by 6.9%? So what are you waiting for? Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for notifications. And while you're at it, equip Scythe of the Harvest and attack the like button directly in the face. Bye-bye!